She's office furniture. Been here forever. Nobody notices her. The words came from behind me at the company lunch, loud enough for everyone within 10 feet to hear. I knew the voice without turning around. The boss's son, 19 years old, 6 months into his first position here, already talking like he built this place with his own hands. His friends laughed. That kind of laughter that makes you feel smaller even when you're trying not to care. I kept my fork moving through my salad, one bite after another, but everything tasted wrong. My throat felt tight. Something heavy settled into my ribs and wouldn't leave. 28 years. 28 years of showing up before anyone else, of answering questions nobody else knew how to answer, of holding this place together when it was falling apart. And now this boy who still asked me where we kept the printer paper was turning me into a joke his friends could laugh at. I finished my salad, stood up, walked right past their booth without looking, without stopping, without giving them anything to work with. But my hands were shaking when I reached my car, and I had to sit there for 3 full minutes before I trusted myself to drive. I wasn't going home, though. Not yet. I had somewhere else to be first. Before we go any further, I want to say thank you for being here and listening to this. If this story means something to you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, do me a favor and hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me your thoughts, and subscribe, because what happened next changed everything, and you're going to want to hear where this goes. My name is Lena, 53 years old, never married, no kids, and for the last 28 years this business has been the closest thing I have to family. People probably look at me and see someone ordinary, brown hair going gray that I keep pulled back in a simple style, clothes from department stores, nothing fancy. I don't wear much makeup, don't draw attention. I learned a long time ago that being quiet and capable gets you further than being loud and demanding. Or at least, that's what I thought. But here's something most people don't know about me. I remember everything. Every conversation, every number, every document that crossed my workspace in nearly 3 decades. My brain works like a filing system that never stops organizing. When someone asks me about a client from 2008, I can tell them not just the name, but the specific issue we solved and which supplier we used to fix it. When the systems crash and everyone panics, I'm the one who knows exactly where the backup files are because I'm the one who created the backup system in the first place. I drove 15 minutes that day, straight to the county records office. The building is old brick, smells like dust and old paper, staffed by people who've worked there longer than I've worked anywhere. I asked for business filings from 1997. The clerk disappeared into a back room and came back with a thin folder. I sat at one of those long wooden work areas and opened it. Inside was the original partnership agreement, black ink on white paper, 2 signatures at the bottom. One of them belonged to my brother. Let me take you back to 1997, because that's where this really starts. The business wasn't a business yet, not really. It was 3 people crammed into a rented space above a hardware store on the east side of town. The building shook every time a truck drove past. The heat barely worked in winter, but the 2 men who started it didn't care about any of that. They had an idea, and they believed in it enough to bet everything. One of those men was the boss. The father? Back then, he wasn't anyone's father. He was just a guy in his early 30s with more energy than money, more vision than experience. He was good with people, could walk into a room of strangers and leave with 3 new friends and 2 potential clients. But he couldn't balance a budget to save his life. The other man was my brother, Caleb. Caleb was the opposite. Brilliant with numbers, could see patterns in data that nobody else noticed, could build financial models that actually made sense. But put him in a room with people and he'd find a window to stare out of within 5 minutes. He was shy, awkward, kind in a way that made him easy to take advantage of if you weren't careful. They met in college, became best friends, stayed close after graduation. When the boss came up with his idea, he needed capital. Caleb had inherited some money when our parents passed. Not a fortune, but enough. They shook hands, filed the paperwork, and became equal partners, 50-50 split, everything down the middle. I came on board as Caleb's assistant. I was 25, working a job I hated, living in a tiny apartment, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with my life. Caleb called me one night and said, "I need someone I can trust, someone who'll actually care about this. Come work with me." So I did. $15 an hour, no benefits, but it was family. That mattered. The business grew faster than anyone expected. The boss brought in clients. Caleb managed the money. I handled everything else: paperwork, scheduling, vendor calls, shipping logistics, employee questions. I was the glue nobody saw, but everyone needed. By 2003, we'd moved into a real building, had 20 employees, revenue in the millions. Caleb and the boss started talking about expansion, about hiring managers, about building something that could last. Then one morning in May, Caleb went for his usual run. He was training for a marathon, trying to get healthier, trying to lose the weight he'd carried since childhood. He made it 2 miles before his heart stopped. Just stopped. A jogger found him on the path near the river. Paramedics tried for 40 minutes. It didn't matter. He was 39 years old. The funeral was small. Caleb didn't have many friends outside of work. The boss showed up early and stayed late. He cried harder than I did, which surprised me because I couldn't cry at all. I felt numb, empty. The boss found me standing alone near the parking area afterward and took both my hands. His were shaking. "Please don't leave," he said. "I know this is awful. I know you're hurting, but I can't do this without someone who knew him, who understood what we were building. Please stay." So I stayed, because I didn't know what else to do. Because the business was the last thing I had that connected me to Caleb. Because the boss seemed genuinely lost without my brother, and I thought maybe helping him through it would help me through it too. The months after Caleb died blur together. I worked 12-hour days, took on responsibilities nobody asked me to take on, kept systems running. The boss threw himself into the work too, I think for the same reasons I did. We didn't talk about the partnership paperwork. We didn't talk about what happened to Caleb's 50%. It just sat there, filed away at the county office, and neither of us brought it up. 2 years later, the boss got married, a woman he met through a client. She was nice, normal. They had a small ceremony, invited the whole company. I went, smiled, gave them a gift, went home alone. In 2006, their son was born. The boss brought him into the office, sometimes when he was little. A loud kid, always running, always knocking things over, always demanding attention. Everyone thought he was adorable. I mostly just tried to keep him from breaking anything important. As the boy grew up, the business kept growing. We hit 50 employees, then 100, opened a second location. The boss bought a big house in the suburbs, started driving expensive cars, started talking differently, acting differently. The man who used to eat lunch in the break room with everyone else started eating in his private office with the door shut. His son grew up believing he was royalty. When the boy turned 18, the boss gave him a position, not an entry-level job like everyone else started with, a real position with a title and a salary that made people whisper. When the boy turned 25, the boss made him director of operations. Nobody was surprised. Everyone knew where this was headed. The son was being groomed to take over, to inherit an empire his father built. Except his father didn't build it alone. His father had a partner whose share never got resolved, a partner whose sister still showed up every single day and made sure everything worked the way it was supposed to. But nobody remembered that. Nobody thought about it. I was just Lena, just the woman who'd been here forever. Part of the walls, part of the furniture. The son walked around like he owned gravity itself. In meetings, he talked over people twice his age with 10 times his experience. He sent messages at 2 in the morning and got annoyed when people didn't respond immediately. 3 months before the furniture comment, I watched him explain to a new hire, "She's been here since dinosaurs roamed. Just ignore her. She doesn't do anything important." I was standing 6 feet away. He knew I could hear him. Last week, we had a major buyer coming to tour the facility. This was a huge deal. The kind of client that could double our revenue if we landed them. The boss got sick the night before. Nothing serious, just a bad flu, but enough that he couldn't come in. He called his son at 6 in the morning and told him to handle it. The son gave the presentation. I sat in the back of the room and watched him fumble through slides he clearly hadn't reviewed until that morning. He used words he didn't understand. When the buyer asked about our quality control protocols, the son waved his hand and said, "We've got people for that. It's handled." Those people were me. I built that entire system in 2004 after we had a batch of defective products nearly cost us our three biggest clients. I researched best practices. I wrote the procedures. I trained everyone. That system saved this company millions of dollars and countless hours of headaches. But the son didn't know that. He'd never bothered to learn. Why would he? I was just furniture. After the buyer left, the son walked past my workspace without a word. Didn't ask if the presentation went well. Didn't thank me for preparing all the materials he'd used. Just walked past, already on his phone, already thinking about something else. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Caleb, about those early days above the hardware store when everything felt possible, about the partnership agreement, about 50% ownership with survivorship rights passing to immediate family. When Caleb died, I inherited his half of the business. Legally, officially, the paperwork was clear, but I never said anything. The boss was grieving. The business was fragile. I didn't want to make things harder. I thought maybe later, when things settled down, we'd figure it out. But later never came. Years passed. The business grew. The boss got comfortable. I got comfortable. The paperwork sat in a cabinet in my apartment, and I stopped thinking about it until the furniture comment. That night, lying awake at 3 a.m, I got up and found the folder, pulled out the original partnership agreement, read it twice, then I read the survivorship clause 5 more times, just to be sure. 50%. Mine. For 28 years. The next morning, I called a lawyer. The lawyer's name was Bridget. She was in her 60s, ran a small practice downtown, came recommended by someone I barely knew but trusted. When I walked into her office that first morning, she looked up from her computer and said, "What can I help you with?" I put the folder on her workspace. "I need to know if this still means what I think it means." She spent 20 minutes reading through everything. Partnership agreement, business registration, my brother's will, the inheritance documents I'd filed back in 2003. When she finally looked up, her expression told me everything before she said a word. "This is airtight," she said. "You've owned 50% of that business for over 2 decades. Has anyone from the company ever contacted you about this? Offered to buy you out? Asked you to sign anything? Dissolving the partnership? No. Have you received any profit distributions? Any documentation acknowledging your ownership stake? No. I just worked there. I get a salary like everyone else." Bridget leaned back. "They've been treating you like an employee, when legally you're a co-owner. That's a problem. For them, not for you." She paused. "What do you want to do about this?" I hadn't slept in 2 days. My brain felt fuzzy around the edges, but one thing was crystal clear. I want what's mine. She helped me understand my options. I could demand profit distributions going back years. I could force a sale of the business. I could sue for damages, or I could do something simpler. I could just show up and claim my seat at the table. "What would you recommend?" I asked. "Depends on what you want. Money? Power? Both?" I thought about the son's face when he called me furniture, about all the years I spent being helpful and invisible, about Caleb, who would have hated seeing what the business had become, what the boss had become. "I want them to see me," I said. Bridget smiled. "Then let's make sure they can't look away." We spent the next 3 weeks building the case. Bridget contacted the boss's personal lawyer, sent over copies of all the documentation, requested an emergency meeting. The boss's lawyer called her back within 2 hours, voice tight with panic. Nobody at the company had any idea this existed. The boss himself didn't remember, or maybe he'd convinced himself it didn't matter, after so many years of silence. Bridget also had the business appraised. She hired a firm that specialized in private company valuations. They spent a week going through financials, assets, client contracts, projected growth. When the report came back, the number made my hands shake. My half was worth $8.3 million. $8.3 million. I'd been showing up every day for 28 years, earning $52,000 annually, while sitting on a fortune nobody acknowledged. The meeting was set for a Thursday morning. Just me, Bridget, the boss, and his lawyer. The son wasn't invited, which the boss probably thought was a kindness, protecting his boy from the messy business details. I barely slept the night before, kept rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd act, but when I walked into that meeting room, all my planned words disappeared. The boss looked older than I'd ever seen him. His lawyer looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Lena, the boss started, but Bridget cut him off. Let's keep this professional. My client has documentation proving she owns 50% of your business. This ownership has been valid since 2003 when she inherited it from her brother, your original partner. You failed to acknowledge this ownership, failed to provide profit distributions, failed to include her in any major business decisions. We're here to remedy that. The boss's lawyer shuffled papers. Our position is that the extended silence on this matter constitutes abandonment of. It doesn't, Bridget said flatly. Ownership doesn't expire because someone chooses not to exercise their rights immediately. Your client benefited from my client's silence for over 20 years. That ends now. I watched the boss's face. He wasn't angry. He looked sad, tired. Lena, I'm sorry. I should have handled this when Caleb died. Everything was chaos. And then time passed, and I convinced myself it was fine. That you were fine. I was fine, I said quietly. I was helpful. I was invisible. And you let me stay that way because it was convenient. What do you want? Bridget answered for me. Fair market value for her 50% stake, $8.3 million. Or, alternatively, full recognition as managing partner with equal decision-making authority and profit sharing moving forward. The room went silent. The boss's lawyer whispered something to him. The boss shook his head, whispered back. They went back and forth for a full minute while Bridget and I sat there, waiting. Finally, the boss looked at me directly. I can't pay you $8 million. The business doesn't have that kind of liquid capital. I'd have to take massive loans, sell assets, maybe sell the whole thing to a corporate buyer just to cash you out. I know, I said. So what are you really asking for? I'm asking to be seen, to be heard, to have a voice in something I've been part of building since before your son was born. I'm asking for what was always mine. His lawyer started to say something, but the boss held up his hand. Give us a minute. The lawyer looked confused, but stood and left the room. Bridget looked at me. I nodded. She left too. Just me and the boss. 28 years of history sitting between us like a weight neither of us wanted to carry. Your son called me office furniture, I said. In front of a dozen people. Laughed about how nobody notices me. The boss closed his eyes. I didn't know. You raised him to think that way. You let him grow up believing he's the center of everything, that people like me don't matter. And maybe part of that is my fault too, because I never demanded you see me differently. I just kept being useful and hoping that would be enough. It was enough. You've been invaluable. Invaluable, but invisible. There's a difference. He opened his eyes. They were wet. What do I do now? You decide what matters more. Protecting your son's feelings, or doing what's right. The lawyers came back in. We talked for another hour. The boss couldn't afford to buy me out, couldn't risk me selling to someone else who might tear apart everything he'd built. So we made a deal. New partnership agreements. I became active managing partner, full profit sharing, equal say in all major decisions. My name on everything official. A real seat, not just a chair in the background. Bridged drew up the papers. We signed them that afternoon. The boss said he'd tell his son that evening. I said no. I wanted to tell him myself. The boss didn't like that, but he agreed. The next morning I arrived at my usual time. The son came in 20 minutes later, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, talking loud about some party he'd gone to the night before. He walked right past me without looking. At 10 o'clock, the boss called him into the main office. I waited 5 minutes, then followed, stood in the doorway. The boss saw me and gestured for me to come in. The son was sitting down, relaxed, probably thinking this was about his upcoming promotion. When I walked in, he barely glanced at me. Why is she here? He asked his father. The boss slid a document toward him. Read this. The son picked it up, started reading. I watched his expression change. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something like panic. What is this? Partnership agreement, I said. Between your father and me. 50-50 split. Effective immediately. He looked at his father. This is a joke. It's not, the boss said. Lena's brother was my original partner. When he died, she inherited his share. That's been legally valid for over 20 years. I should have handled it properly back then. I didn't. Now we're correcting that. So what? She just shows up with some old paper and you give her half the company? Half of everything you built? Everything we built, I corrected. Your father had a partner. That partner had a sister who kept this place running through every crisis for nearly 3 decades. That sister is me. And yes, I showed up with old paper. Old legal paper that's been filed with the county since 1997. The son stood up. His face was red. This is garbage. You can't just— I can, I said calmly. The lawyer confirmed everything yesterday. Your father's lawyer too. It's done. He turned on the boss. Dad, come on. This is insane. She's nobody. She just sits there and— She's your business partner now, the boss said, and his voice had an edge I'd never heard before. You will treat her accordingly. Do you understand? The son stared at him, then at me. He looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under his feet. What does this mean? He asked quietly. It means I have equal say in company decisions going forward, I said. It means I attend every board meeting. It means when we make plans about the future of this business, my voice matters as much as your father's. It means I'm not furniture. He stood there for a long moment, not speaking. Then he walked out, without another word. For the next 2 weeks, the son barely spoke to anyone. He came in late, left early, spent most of his time in his office with the door shut. Other employees noticed, started asking questions. The boss called a company meeting and explained that there had been some ownership clarification, that I was now officially a managing partner, that nothing else would change. People congratulated me. Some seemed genuinely happy. Others looked confused. A few looked resentful, probably wondering why I'd kept quiet all these years. The son didn't attend the meeting. 3 weeks after everything changed, we had our first major decision to make as partners. A supplier we'd worked with for years wanted to renegotiate their contract. The son had been handling that relationship. He wanted to accept their terms without pushback. I looked at the numbers and saw we were being overcharged by nearly 30% compared to market rates. In the meeting, the son presented his recommendation. The boss started to nod along. I spoke up. We're overpaying. I ran comparisons with 4 other suppliers. We can get the same quality for significantly less. The son's jaw tightened. Those other suppliers don't have our history. Relationships matter. So does not wasting money, I said. I pulled out the data I'd compiled. 6 years of performance metrics, cost analyses, quality reports, everything laid out clean and clear. The boss studied the information, looked at his son, looked at me. Lena's right. We renegotiate, or we switch suppliers. The son left the meeting without speaking. 4 weeks later, the boss announced his retirement timeline. Not immediate, but starting in 6 months. Gradual transition over 2 years. And instead of handing everything to his son like everyone expected, he outlined a co-management structure. The son and I would run the company together. Equal authority, equal responsibility. The son's face went white when the boss explained this to the senior staff, but he didn't argue. Couldn't argue. Because legally, I had as much right to lead this company as anyone. After the announcement, the son found me near my workspace. He stood there for a minute, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. I didn't know, he finally said. About your brother? About any of it. I know. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because I didn't think I needed to. I thought doing the work would be enough. I thought being good at what I do would matter. He shifted his weight. The furniture thing. That was— I'm sorry. That was wrong. Yes, it was. Are you going to fire me? The question surprised me. Why would I fire you? Because you could. Because I was awful to you. Because you have the power now. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He was 28 but seemed younger in that moment. Scared. Lost. I don't want power over you, I said. I just want to be seen as a person who matters, who contributes, who's been here longer than you've been alive, and might actually know some things worth listening to. He nodded slowly. Okay, I'll listen. I'll try to do better. That's all I'm asking. He left. And over the following months, something shifted. The son started showing up on time, started asking questions instead of assuming answers, started reviewing data before making recommendations. He wasn't perfect, still had moments of arrogance, still pushed back when he shouldn't, but he was learning. And me? I'm still in the same workspace I've had for 28 years. But now when people walk past, they stop. They ask my opinion. They wait for my input before making decisions. The son nods at me every morning, sometimes even says good morning. Last month, We landed that major buyer, the one from before. They came back for a second tour. This time, I gave part of the presentation, explained our quality control systems, answered their technical questions. When we got the signed contract 2 weeks later, the boss took me and the son out to dinner to celebrate. The three of us sat around a table, and for the first time in years, it felt like a partnership. The son raised his glass. To the team, he said. To the real team, the boss corrected, looking at me. The one that's been here all along. I'm not going to pretend everything is perfect now. The son still has growing up to do. The boss still has habits that frustrate me. But things are different. Better. I'm not invisible anymore. I'm not furniture. Sometimes people ask me why I waited so long. Why I didn't claim my ownership years ago. The truth is, I don't really know. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I thought staying quiet was safer than demanding what was mine. Maybe I needed someone to call me furniture before I remembered I was worth more than that. But I also think about Caleb a lot. About what he'd think of all this. And I believe he'd be proud. Not because I humiliated anyone or destroyed anything, but because I finally stood up and said, I'm here, I matter, notice me. The best part? I didn't have to burn anything down to make them see me. I just had to show them what was there all along. Truth doesn't need drama. It just needs light. Thank you for sticking with me through this whole story. If it made you think about your own life, about times you stayed quiet when you should have spoken up, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you want more real stories about finding your voice when the world tries to silence you. And remember, furniture holds things up, but people who've been holding things up deserve to be recognized for the strength that takes.